Welcome to the Bros of Gardening. I am your host, Mike Westphal, joined always by my co-host, Daniel Van Dyke. How you doing?
I'm good, buddy. We're right into the thick of it now. How are you doing, bud?
Doing good. Alex is also here. Alex will help guide us through this podcast topic, which today is avoiding these plants when landscaping. So what kind of plants do we want to avoid? Or we'll talk about kind of the, different kind of classifications of that. But,
I do want to preface by saying, I love all plants, and we're going to go through some plants that maybe cause people some issues. That doesn't mean these plants aren't good for some people and in certain situations. We're just going to, we always try to help you out to find the right plants for you, and these might be some things that cause people some frustrations or some headaches for one reason or another.
Yeah, a lot of plants that cause problems are just misplaced plants.
Exactly.
Well, so Daniel, since you are a landscape expert here, what has been a plant you've seen installed in landscapes that has always become a maintenance headache within a few years?
Okay, so the way I look at maintenance headaches is there's kind of different ways you can look at maintenance, right? And so for different reasons, different plants will cause you issues. So I'll go through a couple different ones that always come to mind. One that is a great plant. We sell a ton of them. They're an easy plant to grow, super popular, a lot of different varieties, is Abelia.
Yep.
But what I always think about it with Abelia is if you have somebody who wants a very, very well manicured garden, they want nice and tight hedges, nice tight plants, stuff like that. The problem with Abelia is they do grow pretty quickly, they do grow easily, and they'll send out these water shoots, and they get these branches that kind of grow up. It's a little bit more of a wild look. And unless you want to be pruning and doing more maintenance, you might not like that aesthetic, or you might not like that look. Right. It's going to cause you to do a little bit more pruning and a little more upkeep. So again, there's nothing wrong with that. That's not a maintenance like, oh my gosh, this plant is dying, it's causing me a bunch of problems with disease and pests. Super easy plant to grow. It's just from a maintenance standpoint, you may have to give it a little bit more care if you're trying to go for a certain aesthetic.
Right.
So again, Abelia is a great plant, but it's for the right garden, for the right type of gardener. And that's one that a lot of people will put in, because a lot of times when you buy them, they're nice and tight. They've been pruned in the pot or something like that. They look like this really, really well manicured shrub. Then they start growing. They're really happy. You're taking good care of them. So they start growing these water shoots and shooting off branches left and right. So then you go to like more of what I would consider like classic maintenance headaches, which is like roses, something like that that's going to get, you have to spray them. There's a lot more upkeep involved, how you prune them. You have to be more delicate with them and things like that. So roses are one that, again, with the right gardener in the right environment, they're a great plant. They actually are a fairly hardy plant when it comes to, and there's a lot of different forms of roses. Right. Obviously, there's drifts and knockouts, but I'm talking about that classic hybrid tea rose.
Yep.
That's one that when you think of maintenance, you have to spray it and you have to do a little bit more upkeep on it in order for it to perform how you intended and wanted it to perform. And then the last kind of maintenance issue that I think of is something like pampas grass. Again, pampas grass, it's going to grow. I mean, you're not going to have any issues with getting it to grow. Nope. You're not going to have any issues with having it thrive. But when you think about the maintenance part of pampas grass, anybody who's ever messed with this or removed it or pruned it like I have and found out the hard way, it's almost a sharp serrated blade of grass. And so when you grab it, it can actually cut your hands up a little bit, not to the point where you're going to be, need stitches or anything like that, but it's going to be uncomfortable. And so I always think of maintenance in the sense of it can take on different forms, and that's why you really have to have the right environment or the right type of garden, for these certain plants. These aren't necessarily bad plants. You just have to know what you're getting into. And that's what I kind of look at maintenance in different ways.
Yeah. I mean, I would agree. I think I've got Abelia and I love it, except for every couple of weeks I walk by it and I'm like, I need to prune it. I need to prune it. And it's not a ton of pruning. It's just, you got to do it or else they'll get these kind of wild looks. And, I'd throw in like some of the obvious ones, which would be like bamboo. Yeah. I remember when I bought my first home, probably 2 or 3 houses down in my backyard, I could see bamboo. And I was like, we're going to have to move out of this house pretty soon because bamboo spreads and it's impossible to get rid of. I mean, it's so difficult to try and kill and get rid of. So bamboo is not something that we even sell anymore. Some of the Nandinas kind of have that kind of stigma too now, as being a little bit kind of like on the invasive side. And you're going to start seeing it pop up on some of the invasive species list as far as plants go. Ivy would also be in that list of but a lot of them are just where you plant it or how it can be maintained. I mean, if you've got large area of space and you want to grow bamboo because you want it and you're willing to deal with the fact that it spreads, then I mean, I'm never going to say no. I might not might not offer the plant, but it's not to say that you can't get it. And I mean, ivy, we still sell ivy, and ivy is a good plant used in the right places. And what I'll also say is so many new forms of plants are coming out. So many hybrids are coming out because of these issues. Like barberry. I mean, I don't know if you've ever grown barberry before, but kind of always was my least favorite plant because gorgeous summer. I mean, it's dark red. They come in lots of different colors now, like some of the chartreuse greens. Nothing but a thicket of thorns on the inside, which means not a lot of pests, have issues with it, but they do spread. They do spread. And in the winter, I always hated them because they were like trash collectors. All the leaves would blow in there and be a pain to get the leaves out. But they're coming out with new forms now that don't spread. Rose of Sharon. Rose of Sharon for years people loved and still love. It's also called Althea. It's actually a type of hibiscus. Yep. But Rose of Sharon would spread too by seed. And so people kind of got away from them. Now the new forms don't produce a viable seed. So they're working on all of these plants to try and take out some of these issues that we've realized over the years.
Well, and I think like you had said, it's all about the application. And so ivy, for the very reason that it is a maintenance headache, because it spreads, because it can be invasive, that's also why it can be the perfect solution for certain areas. So the house I grew up in, we had this embankment on the side of the house, and it was an erosion problem, constant runoff, and we couldn't get grass to grow, and it was just eroding away. And so we planted the embankment with ivy, and 2 years later, we had this thick, lush, green hillside that the erosion had stopped. All those roots lock in. Now it spread like crazy, but we wanted it to spread like crazy. And then we just kind of maintained the top edge of it, and it could just take off. So like Mike said at the very beginning, I think a lot of it has to do with the placement, which is what causes your maintenance issues as opposed to the actual plant itself.
Gotcha. Yeah. Well, so Mike, are there any specific plants that tend to attract more pests or diseases than homeowners expect when they add them to their garden? Is there any way to prevent this?
So I certainly think it's kind of a similar answer, is like planting the right plants in the right place in the right time of the year and all of those good things. If you do everything properly, you tend to not have a lot of those issues. However, there are things that we've come across, and I think, Daniel knows this one for sure, and I'm probably aging myself a little bit here, but red tip photinia was something that when Daniel and I first started the garden center 20 years ago, every customer, it seemed like, that wanted a screening plant, something to block out a neighbor or privacy screen, asked for a red tip photinia, and we had stopped selling them at that point. And I had never really, I had just started, so I didn't really know what it was. So of course I went and researched it and started seeing them, and they're planted everywhere. So why don't we sell them anymore? Because they get a black spot fungus, and they're going to get it. And because there's so many of them in the area, they're going to get it pretty quickly.
Yep.
Not to say that it can't be treated. They're actually very pretty plants.
They are.
I'm sure you
Absolutely.
experience them
and
all
there's
the
still
time.
people who have them that love them, and they're the beautiful hedge, and they don't understand why people don't grow more of them. And so
bright new red growth, kind of a whitish flower, gets a berry. It's a really pretty plant, but it's going to get the black spot fungus, and you're going to have to treat for it, or else it can eventually kill the plant. So there's things like that. Crepe myrtles are starting to get a little bit of that negative attention because of a scale that really, it's called the crepe myrtle bark scale. It can affect other plants, but typically it's on crepe myrtles. That's where they love to be. And it produces a fungus called sooty mold. So, now you've got two different problems. Now, I'm not going to say don't plant crepe myrtles. We still sell them. They're a great tree. It's the tree of 110 days of blooms. It is an amazing tree, planted in the right space. And then it's just maintenance. It's just watching it a little bit, saying, okay, let me just check on this every so often. Do I start to see any of these insects or pests show up? He mentioned roses. Roses, like you mentioned, hybrid teas, grandifloras, all your long stem types of roses have issues in our area because of the humidity. So it's going to be a little bit of a maintenance thing. Make sure you give them plenty of sun. There's lots of tips and tricks. Be preventative, not curative. Limb them up a little bit to create good airflow. So there's lots of different things you can do. I think probably the most popular plant, especially over the past probably 10 years, that will have pest problems, but I would never recommend not planting them, is fruit trees. Fruit trees have lots of little issues. You think of a peach, very soft skin, lots of worms, love to get in it. All of your fruit trees have a sweet sap.
Yeah.
which can attract borers. So I know Daniel's probably experienced this as much as I have, which is it's kind of gross. Customers come in and say, what is this, gummy kind of, weird substance coming out of my tree? It's just coming out of these little holes. And those are borers. They get in there and they eat the inner part of the tree because it's a sweet sap. But fruit trees are great. I mean, if you can get apple trees and peaches and plums and cherries, all of those grow in our area and you can have a nice little home orchard. And so there's lots of options there. It's just a little bit of maintenance, a little bit of, you got to take those things on. And we always recommend that whenever anybody gets a fruit tree. I'll usually tell them, get a couple fruit trees, plant them. Come back if you start to experience problems. Some people never have problems. Some people do. And then we get you on a spray schedule. It's very easy to do. And then I'll always recommend some other easier fruits that don't have problems, like figs. Figs have no issues. I mean, they're like one of the easiest. Maybe wasps. I guess wasps can get into the fruit sometimes. But blueberries, raspberries, blackberries. I mean, I think every plant probably has a little bit of a negative thing that I could always point out. But I think all plants are great. And I love all plants. So I just always say, hey, do a little bit of research. Let us help you and tell you and guide you a little bit with some of those choices that you might make and make you be prepared for what you're getting into.
Right.
That's definitely like when you mentioned the borers, I guess even the ornamental cherries,
Right.
those are the ones we see it all the time. I mean, everybody loves them. We're experiencing it right now. Everybody's enjoying, we're getting, late March, early April, you see everything. It's kind of my sign that spring has arrived. And so all the cherries are opening up, but they do have borers and they have certain problems like that. And if you see it, they're easy to treat. And so again, that's why we still sell a ton of cherries. We design cherries into our landscape plans. The one that jumped to me that Mike mentioned is crepe myrtles because, they were known for being so low maintenance.
Right.
You plant, they'll grow anywhere. So you see them in medians, you see them in parking lots, all these tough areas to grow, different trees. So we'll go with the crepe myrtle. Yep. And they still have all those great qualities. They'll still grow in tough places. They're almost impossible to kill. And then even, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, this won't kill them necessarily. Right. No. It just makes them look unattractive and it can affect the plant material underneath it. And so crepe myrtles are definitely the one to me that we still plant a ton of. We just always give people a heads up of what to look for. Yeah. And I mean, even we have a community here in the Tidewater area that we do a lot of work for. And I got with Mike because they had planted, I guess maybe when they built the community 20, 30 years ago, I mean, I think there's like 120 crepe myrtles that line the streets and in yards, and they all had it horribly a couple years ago when we came in to redesign it. And we started the treatment program, and Mike helped me kind of put it together. And we've been treating them, and they've all flushed back out now, and they're fairly clean on the stems and on the bark. And it's we got rid of all that black coloring, and we've kind of eradicated it now. And so we're doing it on a little more preventative foot at this point. But yeah, it works. And so if you know what to look out for. And then, visit, if you do have any of these problems pop up, come in, visit your local garden center, and they can remedy for you. Most of the time there is a remedy available. Right?
And if it can be cured on 120 crepe myrtles, if you've got 2 in your yard, it's pretty easy to resolve. And that's kind of my other thing is just, I think of like hydrangeas. Hydrangeas are one of the most sought after plants. People almost every homeowner that takes care of their yard probably has a hydrangea or 2 somewhere planted. They can get the black spot fungus too. It's very normal in this area. It typically is because maybe they're watering overhead. Maybe they got a sprinkler system that hits the leaves. Maybe they're trying to grow a lawn and they've got a sprinkler system that is kind of hitting and splashing the plants. Or maybe they just didn't know, hey, water the root system, don't water the leaves. So there's lots of those things that can pop up on even some of our most desirable plants. They're all pretty easy to resolve.
Yeah. Now, Daniel, from a design standpoint, are there any plants that homeowners choose because they grow fast but end up regretting it later because they get way too large?
Well, so there's a couple different ones that, again, it comes down to location. And so I'll give you 2 examples. One that just grows really fast, but almost grows too fast for its own good is like a Leyland cypress. So Leyland cypress, you don't see them as much anymore for this very reason. But again, like Mike was talking, back when we got started, people would come in looking for Leyland cypresses all the time. And we had them, but we had started to kind of phase out and try to find other plants that might be able to accomplish the same thing because they do grow so quick. They don't develop a root system. They're so, it's a dense evergreen conifer. So, catches a ton of wind. It, holds snow. I mean, all those types of things. It grows really, really quick, which is why I always kind of refer to some plants as contractor grade. And so, and that not necessarily is a slight of the plant. It's just usually something that grows fast, so you can find it in a decent size for fairly cheap. So a lot of times when people are building houses, they're going to go find these plants and stick them in, and they might not put them in an appropriate place.
Right.
So Leyland cypress has its issues with, the root system having some issues, not necessarily a lot of disease and fungus issues, but just environmental issues in this area. But one that people I see misplanted a lot that they probably regret for the same reason is ligustrum. So ligustrum is a great plant. We sell a ton of it. I design it constantly, but you have to make sure you're thinking 5-10 years down the line. And that's really what causes your maintenance issues most of the time, is they're not thinking about 5 or 10 years. They're thinking about right now. And what do people love to use ligustrum for? Privacy. And so if you plant a ton of ligustrum really tight, and you plant them in a tight spot because you're trying to block out a trash can or you're trying to block out a neighbor, 5 years from now, when that ligustrum's getting 8-10 feet tall, wants to get 10 feet wide if you'll let it, and you're trying to keep it 5 feet tall by 2 feet wide, it's just not, you're going to be fighting a losing battle, and it's going to be a constant maintenance headache. So again, ligustrum are one of the toughest plants, easiest to grow, all that fun stuff. But again, a lot of time you see them misplanted. So when I say they regret it, if you stick that on a front foundation underneath a windowsill, you're going to be fighting a losing battle to keep that from blocking that entire window. So again, it's more so to do with the actual location of it that causes the maintenance issue than the plant itself. But that's one that I see misplanted a lot because they're easy to get, they look good, they're a dark green, they're usually a pretty good size starting out. And so you see people kind of sticking them in for instant gratification, but then in the long run, you're going to end up, regretting it at times if you don't put it in the right spot.
Gotcha. Well, so now for both of you, if you were able to pick, what would be the top 3 plants you would, I would say, steer clear from when designing a landscape? Not that necessarily that you think these are bad plants, but just something that you would just probably not put on the top of your list.
Yeah.
All right, you do one, I'll do one. Go ahead.
All right, I'll put wisteria.
Wisteria, okay.
And that's the Chinese wisteria. Chinese wisteria goes crazy, and it's gorgeous. I mean, huge purple blooms, but it is an extremely aggressive vine, will choke out trees, and it can just run wild. I mean, it can just kind of take over an area. You see it wild on the interstate, growing amongst trees and choking out trees on the interstate, because unfortunately it spreads, and it's just not a great plant anymore. Now, there is a native wisteria, one that grows in this area naturally, much smaller bloom. So, of course, you think of wisteria, you think of these long, hanging purple blooms. That's the Chinese wisteria. The local native wisteria is a much smaller bloom, but not as aggressive and easier to control. So there's always a good option. Wisteria, Chinese wisteria would be the one that I'd steer clear of.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. Before I get to mine, a lot of times when you're driving down the interstate, you won't notice till winter. But what you think is the tree, a lot of times it's actually the wisteria growing up a dead tree. And then when the wisteria defoliates, you're like, oh no, that tree's dead. So it's been choked out. So it's a good point. So, all right. So the one that I'm going to go to is Bradford pear. So Bradford pear is another one that got planted a lot. Blooms. It's fragrant. It's an ornamental pear.
Gorgeous tree.
It's a gorgeous tree.
Yep.
But it has some issues. Again, it almost grew so vertically, and then it would shoot off these branches that it didn't have it was a very weak branch structure. And so a lot of times
split.
It would split. Like literally the tree would grow up. You're like, oh, I've got this beautiful tree. You a little snow and some wind or something like that, it would literally just split.
Wow.
Yep. And they were planted like crazy for years.
And they spread too.
Yeah.
So not
So,
only do they split, they're also spread all over the place.
Again, there are other pear trees you can do now. I think like a Chanticleer pear. There's like Mike was saying, but that is still, I mean, you hear Bradford pear all the time. And it's a very popular plant. It was planted a ton of it, but that is one that I do try to avoid, for those reasons.
You see them a lot, or now you don't, or you see half a tree now.
Yeah, exactly.
Planted like on the corner of like an intersection.
Yep.
It'd be like one on every single corner.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden, the tree gets so big and all the weight can rest on a quarter of the tree or a half of the tree almost, that the wind would just knock it out. And then you'd start to see half a tree, and then you'd start to see the cities taking them down. So no longer do we sell Bradfords. And because of that, unfortunately, the Chanticleer or the Cleveland Select, there's two different name ones that I remember, aren't really sought after anymore because of that same issue. They can spread a little bit, and people just have this negative connotation towards pears, unfortunately. But also fortunately, we learned our lesson.
Right. Any other ones you'd recommend? Or
I'll throw in a tree. I'll throw in weeping willow, which weeping willow is one of like the prettiest trees ever. I think a lot of people probably remember it from, Alice in Wonderland, where there's like a gorgeous weeping willow tree kind of, and you see it a lot in like England and old. They love water. They need water. Like they will find water, meaning if you don't have a readyable water source for it, like a small pond, a lake, something, if it's not nearby a drainage ditch, it'll break into your water pipes. So it can cause major issues down the road. And then here's the other kicker with it is it doesn't have a certain life expectancy. All of a sudden, it could die. So they could live 10 years, they could live 15 years, 20 years, 30 years, but sometimes they just up and die for no reason at all. And so you won't see us selling many weeping willows anymore. People still ask for them, and we still do sell some, and there are some better varieties that have come out. But weeping willow is a tree that I usually have a lot of warnings when I talk to a customer about and say, warning, 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 you need to be careful of this one.
Right.
So for my second one, I'll go back to the Leyland cypress. I know I mentioned it a little bit, but that's another one that people bring in pictures all the time of these big hedges and these beautiful Leyland cypress hedges. And again, in the right application, I know there's some people who are going to swear by them and say they're the greatest plant of all time. But a couple things to remember is you have to have so much space. I mean, these things get huge. I mean, they're going to get big on you. So if you have a ton of space, you've got plenty of acreage, whatever the case may be, you want to create a screen. I'm not saying they won't work, but again, I think the reason I bring it up is to give an alternative solution. If you want kind of that shape, conifer evergreen, that's going to get real big, I just would steer clear of the Leyland and maybe go with like a green giant arborvitae. You're going to get a lot of the same qualities, a lot of the same benefits of it, but it's just going to be a little bit better rooted. It's going to have a little bit better branch structure. And we've just had more success with those long term, to try to accomplish the same thing. So Leylands, because of the shallow roots, I mean, that's why you'll see, in a snowstorm or a windstorm, the entire thing just gets uprooted. And it's really not that, for the size of that tree, the root that comes with it is not very impressive. I mean, if you ever see a big tree fall over, you can have a 15-foot mound of dirt, massive roots that pulls up. For sure. But then you see a Leyland blow over that's 30 feet tall, and it's only got like a 5-foot round, root system that comes with it. So just a very weak and shallow rooted tree. So I just think there are better alternatives that you can use that give you the same, kind of factors and things you can do.
Gotcha. Well, guys, any other ones? Or
I think that's it. I mean, I will say in closing, a lot of like what we said, which is proper placement. Think about it. That's why I would recommend always dealing with, your local garden center, whether it's your local landscaper or your local garden center, somebody that has been in the area long enough and has had some of these issues and mistakes occur, and they've found better solutions for it. I mean, the Leyland cypress is a perfect example of something that we will still offer, but we have a better option, and we'll be very honest with you about that. We're not gonna, sugarcoat anything and tell you something that's not true. We have our warnings for some of these plants, and so we definitely want you to be knowledgeable about all those things before you get into it.
Yep. And I think for me, there's a list of plants that I try to steer clear of, like you just asked, and there's other plants that, like Mike said, I think just come with a lot of warnings. So one plant that we do a ton of that I don't necessarily steer clear of, I just might try to properly warn, is like gardenia.
Yeah,
Gardenias
that's a great one.
Can be very frustrating for somebody who's trying to grow it because they can be a bit finicky in this area. And so that's just one where if somebody's like, I want to be a hands-off, like I want you all to plant it, I don't want to deal with it, I just want it to be hardy, low maintenance, all that kind of stuff, well, then I might not recommend a gardenia for them because that can be frustrating for them. Or if it's, again, if it's a really, really wet area, I mean, there's just different reasons to avoid gardenias, but that's probably the most popular plant that we get a request for that we might say, let's make sure you want to do a gardenia here because, they do require a little bit more, iron. A lot of times they need to be supplemented with iron, and there's a couple more nutrient things that they need compared to something that you can just stick in the ground and enjoy it, like a Sasanqua camellia or something like that.
When they go to produce those blooms, they use a ton of iron. And so almost after their big bloom set, they're dropping a ton of leaves. And you can supplement with iron, and that helps, but it's something that you need to do. That's a great example, because when I talk to customers, I almost always am like, you might want to just get one gardenia. If they've got like 5 or 6 of them, I might say, what are you using those for? Maybe there's a better option, and maybe plant one gardenia near a bedroom window or by the front porch or somewhere that you can experience the fragrance, but you only have to maintain 1 or 2 or 3 of them versus an entire hedge of them. So,
when they start dropping the leaves, like Mike was saying, from the iron, people assume, it needs more water. And then you start watering it, leaches the soil more, they get root rot. So that's just one where, like I said, it's a great plant. People love it for a reason, fragrant, all that. We carry them, plant them. Just know what you're signing up for. So that's one where it's like, I don't necessarily steer clear of it. I just may offer a few additional warnings when planting or landscaping them.
Gotcha.
Another last quick example would be like shade trees. Super important. Y'all know I love trees. Shade trees are one that I used to always sell, and I'd always give like a, hey, every shade tree has a little bit of a problem. Oaks drop acorns. Maples drop the whirlybirds, and they have a very heavy top root system. So you got to be careful about where you plant them, like near driveways and concrete. And river birch. Those were our 3 kind of favorite trees. River birch are extremely twiggy, which means in storms, you got twigs all over your yard. But they're all great shade trees. I mean, willow oaks are one of my favorite shade trees. They drop acorns. October glory maple, amazing shade tree. It's got some problems. It drops those little spinners, and it has heavy root system. And then river birches are a little messy sometimes. And sometimes in the summer, it'll drop half of its leaves. So they all have problems, but they're all, fairly reasonable problems to deal with. And no plant is perfect, just like no person's perfect. And so we deal with some of those, issues. And then it's like you said, just kind of knowing what maintenance you might have to do on them.
Yeah, that's the best way to look at it when going in.
If we knew what plant it was that bloomed 12 months out of the year, evergreen, smelled great, grew to whatever size you personally wanted to grow.
You tell it where to grow.
We'd all be millionaires.
Yeah, we'd be good to go.
For sure. All right. Well, speaking of which, I think that just about wraps everything up.
Perfect. Well, thank you guys. Great topic. All right. Next week, we're going to be it's getting closer to that frost date, and we're going to start talking about vegetables. Woohoo. So vegetable gardening is the topic for next week, getting to know your veggies, and we'll see you then. So like, subscribe, rate, review, all of those great things. If you're watching us on YouTube, definitely subscribe to our channel, and we'll see you next week.